Welcome to Decode Dune, an exegesis of the Dune Universe.
Jeff, I wanna start this episode off by quoting Ricky Martin's 1999 hit single "Livin, vida, loca."
Please.
I woke up in New York City in a funky, cheap hotel. She took my mind and she took my money. She must have slept me a sleeping pill. She never drinks the water. Okay, why do I say that? It's because this chapter starts. Yue has slipped Paul a sleeping pill.
Motherfucker. I
They're
knew it.
We're on Arrakeen. Paul is in bed. He's been giving a sleeping pill. He palmed it. And he does not want to go to bed. He's a precocious young man. He wants to go explore. This is where we start.
All right.
He is also aware of the fact that Yui and his mother are talking some room over, and they're having a conversation, and he's thinking, I'm not going to be doing anything bad as long as I stay in the house. So he's going to go do that, and basically he is now fussing around in his bedroom, and he sees an old film from the Imperial's Majesty Desert Botanical Testing Station. It's an old book about the flora and fauna of Arrakis. It's from, it seems like if it says the Old Empire, that would be something like 10,000 years ago. And as he's fussing around in his bedroom, he's got this old wooden headboard that in a previous chapter, Jessica recognizes that all of this stuff had to have been imported, not just from a nearby planet, but from literally out of that planetary system. So when we talk about the guild and the type of shipping and travel that they enabled, we have the equivalent of, we have giant boards of wood transported from an entire star system away just to build this house that they're living in. Yeah. So that's the scale of travel, right? You have to imagine, I guess it would almost be like getting bamboo from Japan or China and, getting it to like your house in Boca Raton, Florida, but like back in, 1650 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So pretty impressive. It's carved out of wood. It's ornate. It's great. And a hunter-seeker, no more than 5 centimeters long, comes out of the opening where his head had been laying just a moment before. So you imagine it has like an opening that kind of has maybe some shelf space or some storage or something like that, or is just a booby trap to, kill whoever would be there. Could go either way. This hunter-seeker comes out. A hunter-seeker is effectively speaking a drone.
It's a shitty drone. Yeah.
It's a shitty drone. As far as I understand, it's sort of like a hypodermic needle that is remote controlled in sort of stereotypical drone fashion, right? It has poison into it. It's small enough that it can fully enter into your skin and then travel up to your nearest major organ. And then I would assume then like the poison would be kind of squeezed out of it, and then it would poison you.
Yeah. The hunter-seeker confuses me. It has always. And here's why. There is both an operator and it is described as having a kind of a mind of its own, like it's attracted to movement or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, this is a world in which computers are no-nos.
That is correct.
Yeah. So I've always wondered, like, how does it get? I understand the part where there's a pilot who I think is literally like baked into a wall. Like, didn't they brick him into a wall?
I don't even know if I understand that part, because I would think that. So, here's what it doesn't say specifically.
Yeah.
And a dum-dum like me needs to see it specifically. So a drone in the modern context, you hear about podcasters like us talking shit, right? Mm-hmm. Some fucking military guy in Arizona is bombing people. Innocent people in Pakistan, which is actually true and worthy of critique.
Is absolutely true, yeah. And definitely worthy of critique, yes. But
I'm mostly just making fun of the podcasters.
Yeah, but that's a real thing. So there are guys on air bases sitting inside of
Yeah, they're playing video games, right?
Just like this dude who
right.
who has been bricked into this wall.
Yeah, I think he's in like the basement of the house or something like that. He's in like near where the cistern is, and he had
like in Lynch's movie, he's wearing like World War II fucking like radio headgear. It's so fucking stupid. But anyway,
yeah. But in the modern context, I should have maybe looked this up ahead of time, and maybe we'll do a edit or later. But hold on, maybe someone can look it up real quick. In the modern context, what is it that the navigator of the drone, who again, yes, they're in Utah or Arizona or whatever, but they're flying this thing all the way out in Pakistan or Qatar or what have you. Yeah. What is it that they're using to be able to visualize where they're going? Is it just a little camera, like just a little camera that's on the drone itself? I would think that's possible. People make drone movies all the time. In fact, I'm going to do a personal plug. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll help you out here. So this is from the Dune Encyclopedia. We get some important information about who invented it, which I'll leave out. But I'll read just this part. Elegant in its simplicity, the Hunter-Seeker was composed of two parts: the control console, from which its operator directed the weapon's movements, and the Hunter-Seeker proper, a hair-thin metal sliver measuring 5 centimeters or less. The sliver is powered by a compressed suspensor field, which gave the operator the combined advantages of speed, 100 kph. So I guess that's kilometers per hour. I'm from America, so I don't know how many inches per year that is. But seems fast. Okay. Yeah. Anyway. Haha. And high maneuverability. In the hands of a skilled operator, it could also be moved with the exquisite timing necessary to penetrate a personal force shield. So there's a dude driving it.
Yeah.
Is there a camera?
Unclear.
Fiber
optic sort of thing.
On.
Fun fact.
Wait. We actually know. There's a crystal eye. At one end of the sliver, the nose, was a pointed crystal eye. Through this, the operator would see to hunt his or her prey. Harder than the metal making up the body of the sliver, the eye was also the tip with which the hunter-seeker entered its victim's body. So this isn't a hypodermic. It's not injecting. Like many weapons, it's coated. So just like a blade would be, it's coated with whatever the poison is.
Right. Very Red Viper.
Very Red Viper, yes.
Thank you to Jet, our producer. The tip held a camera that transmitted a video signal back to the operator. Vision was distorted by the compressed suspensor field. Once detected, the target was almost guaranteed to be killed.
Yeah, that's literally right out of the encyclopedia.
Oh, okay.
That poor guy, he probably makes no money.
Yeah.
And this whole
show.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
There are a couple comments I want to make at this juncture. 2, at least. 1, it would be great if the Dune Encyclopedia, which is something like 450 pages, if it had a table of contents. So that would be really helpful, but unfortunately it doesn't. So later on, we're going to talk about Prana-Bindu training and the Bene Gesserit training largely. There isn't a section on Prana-Bindu in the encyclopedia. You have to look up Bene Gesserit training. The second is Jeff made a joke about a minute ago about being from America and not knowing the metric system, but Jeff, I'm not going to reveal his personal details, but he got a little under the weather and he messaged me, I lost like 2 kilos or something.
Yeah, 2 kilograms, that's true. Yeah. So fighting, here's where the metric system becomes important to me. When I have to think about who I might fight and how much they weigh, then we need precision. So kilograms, I understand.
I was just like, the fuck is this? I mean, not really.
I was just trying to be funny, to be honest with you. I wish we would just get off our bullshit and move, because sorry to all you lovers of the imperial system.
Yeah.
It's fucking better. It's way easier.
Yeah.
And having to do these stupid conversions in your head just slows everybody down.
Yeah, I'd say it takes one generation. Like in the same way the Common Core math is wonky to the adults who are now teaching their kids.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started.
I don't have children, but if I do, I will probably not teach them math. But I was going to make a joke about, like, I don't know, like, teaching them to hunt or it doesn't matter.
So I have to tell you a quick story.
Okay.
So before, sorry.
Thank you for saving. No, please. Thank you for saving me.
No. This actually, it's related to things that are completely unrelated to the podcast, but related to what you're saying. So it was many years ago, long time ago, but my oldest son, I was trying to help him with math. Here's a really bad idea. Dad, who is a software developer, trying to work with like a little kid who's trying to learn math. It was just ill-fated from the beginning. Anyway, the story is this. So my son has like a very simple mathematical proposition. I'm trying to teach him how to do the basic math quickly in his head. And so I teach him an algorithm for addition and subtraction that is easy and intuitive to me. It is not what they teach in school. So this created a problem both for my son, who was like struggling to understand what I was telling, even though it was easier, it didn't match what he was being taught. And so it created some confusion. But then it also created like some frustration between his mother and I, because his mother was like, why would you do things that way? So this is really the core. If you ever go on Facebook and you see them pass around these, like, look at what the core curriculum is teaching these kids. It's bananas. We should just do it the old fashioned way. And of course, what people don't realize is that, like, for instance, carrying numbers is not at all simple or straightforward. But more importantly, what they don't know is that there are probably like 5 or 6 algorithms that will return the same result, all equally effective. And then there's just questions about the efficiency of each, but they'll all return the right result. I haven't met a single adult in my social circle who's parenting who understands that. So part of the reason that I believe that we have this perspective of like, it's got to be inches, it's got to be miles, it's got to be pounds, is the way that we are taught makes us think this is the only way. Yeah. So fuck that Common Core is basically what I'm saying.
I don't know anything about that Common Core other than it's apparently a different way than anyone who is now raising their children learned it. I feel like I don't remember anything we did. I mean, very, very basic stuff. I don't remember. I would say, broadly speaking, I don't remember math. And so I would probably just need to relearn it all over again if I were ever in that position. And that might actually be beneficial in some way.
Well, right. So thank God you can do it now when people will teach you how to think, which is what some of the ways in which Common Core is taught. Common Core does not prescribe this stuff, but that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, you would learn different approaches. You wouldn't learn just one.
Yeah.
Which is more valuable in the long run than the actual algorithm you pick to solve the problem.
Oh, wow, Jeff.
Bingo, bango, bongo.
Wow. Okay. I don't know if you did this on purpose, but I think you did. I'm going to give you credit that you did. This loops right back to the beginning of the chapter. Many have remarked the speed with which Muad'Dib learned the necessities of Arrakis. The Bene Gesserit, of course, know the basis of this speed. For the others, we can say that Muad'Dib learned rapidly because his first training was in how to learn.
That's exactly
and
right.
The first lesson of all was the basic trust that he could learn. It is shocking to find how many people do not believe they can learn, and how many more believe learning to be difficult. Muad'Dib knew that every experience carries its lesson. From the
Frank Herbert
of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
It's beautiful. Frank Herbert anticipated Carol Dweck's work 30, 40 years ahead of her paper. So what he's referring to is fixed versus growth mindset and the way that it applies itself, the way that it's applied to learning. Yeah, I don't want to go off on some rant on education, but that's exactly right. So the Bene Gesserit know many ways to do a thing. What's most important is not which one you favor, but how you learn.
Yeah.
I think military basic training now emphasizes this. So like if you went through basic training or you went through like some of the advanced training, you'll get an understanding for this. But by and large, teachers are still teaching in a post, like in an industrial
Yeah,
setting.
they're teaching. I don't want to say the way. They're teaching, but there's a rigidity around.
Oh yeah,
around
Mandalorians versus Bene Gesserits. I love it.
Yeah.
Put your helmet on and shut up, kid.
Speaking of me being a dum-dum again, and you commenting that Frank Herbert was predicting what was her name?
Carol Dweck.
Carol Dweck
Carol
in her
Dweck,
growth versus fixed mindset.
Yeah. So what she found out is that people who believe that smartness is an innate or essential trait, they believe that it's in you.
Right.
That's a closed mindset.
Right.
A fixed mindset.
Right.
So you can only ever do as well as your genetic. It's very Star Wars. You could only be the Jedi that you can be with the number of midichlorians in your bloodstream.
Right. Right.
Versus a growth mindset, which takes the position that anyone can learn anything if they apply themselves to the learning. And given that that's the case, then knowing how to learn is a fundamentally more valuable skill than any piece of like fixed knowledge.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Teach a man how to fish, but that man must believe that he's capable of learning how to fish. He must know how to learn.
Right.
If he believes that fishermen are born to fishermen families and it's in their blood, any failure will feel like a permanent setback.
Yeah, I was gonna do, and I was gonna feel very cliche doing it, but fuck it, who cares? So we're on, I would say that we're on the Joe Rogan Experience and the Chapo Trap House coaching tree. If those coaches, so let's talk about the origin of our podcast in relation to in the constellation of other podcasts around it. So where am I going with this? Joe Rogan has said it a million times. I'm not going to quote it. That's fine. We'll use it to our advantage in the marketing. The Miyoda Musashi comment of once you know the way broadly, you see it in all things, right? I would think that's kind of the idea of, I'm encountering a new problem. I don't know how to solve it, but I know that I know how to learn. So
that's right.
In knowing how to learn, I will know how to solve it. Now, the Musashi quote's been applied to a lot of different things. I like it here. It makes me feel smart. It'll help with the SEO. And I think that's all I have to say about that. Oh, here's what I did want to say, though. Speaking of when you commented Frank Herbert predicted this, if you're a dum-dum like me, you read about the hunter-seeker and you're like, holy shit, Frank Herbert he had, in the way that science fiction can possibly, sort of deliver the predictions of what society will do in the future, and then society will go and do it. If you're me, you're thinking that Frank Herbert predicted the drone. However, some research indicated that the first modern drone was actually developed in 1935 when the Royal Air Forces commenced in 1918. The UK needed effective methods for training pilots. Target practice was typically accomplished by towing gliders behind crewed aircraft. However, that method failed.
That seems perfectly safe.
Yeah.
That live fire training must have been so fun.
That method failed to provide a realistic simulation for engaging enemy fighters in live combat. In response, the de Havilland DH.82B Queen Bee aircraft was used, a low-cost radio-controlled drone developed for aerial target practice. It is considered by many to be the first modern drone. So there's a Consort IQ short history of unmanned aerial vehicles, or a UAV. I'm going to include that in the show notes. Interesting stuff here, I guess, if you want to consider the drone the eventual endpoint of some of this. The first UAV is actually a hot air balloon, and that was launched for the first time in 1783. Mm-hmm. And the first military use of a UAV was in 1849. Austrian artillery lieutenant Franz von, I'm going to say Uchatius invents the balloon bomb. Field Marshal von Radetzky used the balloons to attack Venice, but they were mostly ineffective. So anyway, cool show notes. Frank Herbert did not predict the drone as I thought when I first was reading this. It turns out that he was probably aware of all these things. Again, as a journalist, he covered a lot of different things. So the U.S. drone program actually began in 1936 with U.S. Admiral William Harrison Stanley witness a test flight of the Queen Bee in 1936. So again, that was the UK's version of it. So pretty cool. Drones been around.
Yeah. Well, computers first code breaking during World War II, but then very quickly guidance systems for machine guns and rockets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Which
anyway,
in another world, we're doing a podcast about David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, and I'm trying to be like, did he predict early phase Netflix, or did he just sort of have some insider information at the idea of someone saying, what if we send DVDs in the mail? Because that is effectively speaking how everyone gets their entertainment in Infinite Jest, is they get
that's
a
right.
couple packets of entertainments delivered every day, and then they put them into their player in the evening, and then they return them. So that was a good 6 years before, maybe before. Anyway, I'm rambling.
That's okay.
Things
you want to know
consider.
why?
But can the author, so there's an interesting podcast or blog, I'll find it and include it in the show notes as well, is about the idea of who really invents things, and the people credited to them are rarely the inventor so much as the seeds are planted in a million places and sort of all narrow down to one person being credited with that. So that's just where I was going, is can the science fiction author truly just out of nowhere predict something that we're seeing, like the idea of a device that you're married to in your hands today predicted by someone like 40 years ago? Or were those things already kind of out there and already being worked on in research labs, and they basically just kind of got privy to that information? You sound like you were going to say something.
Well, there's a couple of things, but so one of them, I was just having a conversation with my daughter yesterday, just about, it's a great question. So I was explaining to her why people in my industry and technology, why we're viewed as like nerds or this idea that we're socially awkward or shy really comes, I mean, it's true that there are people in my field who are that way, who are introverts, but not everyone in software engineering is introverted. And actually, I haven't seen a single study that shows that introversion in some way makes you a better software developer or is the natural state for people in STEM or engineering. However, here's one reason that I believe people have that perspective. And it's because one keyboard, one monitor. Like that's the way that when I'm working in an office, it's been a million years, but when I'm working in an office, here's what people see, especially now in modern day. They see you with your headphones on, you're immersed in thought and typing, and you're interacting with your keyboard and your screen. But so then and we need quiet and a lot of space to think. So if you interrupt somebody in flow, they can probably get pretty ornery or pissed off, and it could give you the perspective that they don't want to interact with other humans. But the truth is actually more interesting, as it often is. The truth is this has more to do with the history of computing in general than it does with sort of the psychological and physiological composition of humans that do this as a job. So why do we use a keyboard? Why do we have a monitor? Because today's computing devices are modeled off the teletype. That's it. Why do you have an @ sign in your email address? Because it was an unused character on the teletype. Right? There's no special sauce there. As a matter of fact, I love when people talk about digital as sort of a reference for modern or cool, because calling computers digital was actually a backhanded joke. Why is it a joke? Because what was the computer doing? The computer is doing math that a second grader can do. Effectively counting on its fingers and toes, which is what digital refers to.
Right.
Yeah. People typically don't know that. So it sounds modern and cool. You see all those things where they put the @ sign and of course, because now it's a signifier of the internet, but its actual history, just an unused character on a keyboard. So there's no reason that humans should interact. So first of all, software development is not done by the individual. That's the first misconception. Software development is a team sport. It's done by many people working together. But again, you wouldn't know that from watching from the outside. So anyway, I just find it fascinating. There's no reason that computers have to behave this way. There's nothing terribly efficient about the way that we compute today.
Mm-hmm. Well,
typing is limited. It's limited to your typing speed.
So Paul.
Oh, wait. So hold on. So we did
Okay.
this whole thing. I really wanted to say this. Do you want to know? So Shaddam's reign, or the end of his reign, coincides with the end of the Hunter Seeker as a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Why? A thing called the reversant was invented.
Mm-hmm.
What does the reversant do? It identifies the field generated by the Hunter Seeker, and then it amplifies it. I don't know. I have no idea how this actually works, but it causes the operator to literally vaporize.
Oh.
It explodes the operator and his console in a way that it says the resulting explosion was violent enough to eliminate all but a few traces of the person operating the console.
So the encyclopedia was published at the time of Heretics of Dune, before Chapter House.
Uh-huh.
And this is where Frank said, this might not be canonical because I might have some plans. But more importantly, I think that's an explanation of why the Hunter Seeker never comes up again in any of the other books.
Yeah. Also, if you play Uno, you understand the importance of the reversant card.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So Paul, we come to realize this is because of his Bene Gesserit training that Paul is literally so the rules of the Hunter Seekers, if you move, it'll find you. So you have to stay very still, and then there's a sound outside the door. Of course, if the door was open, the Hunter Seeker would immediately go and kill whoever's at the door. Paul uses his.
I just don't understand how it. So back to my confusion. How the fuck did it do that? Like if I'm looking through the eye of a needle.
Yeah.
It's not like my peripheral vision expands. It literally contracts.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you just have to like move an inch to the right or to the left, and then you'd be invisible to that thing? Anyway, I don't want to ruin this for anybody. This thing, I don't buy it.
It's a little wonky. See, this is the joy of the podcast for me. Is Jeff was like, we got a podcast about Dune, and there are things in there that I'm like, I love Dune, but there's some of it that's just wonky, and we've managed to spend some time talking about it, ultimately concluding that it's wonky, which is helpful for me because now I just feel validated, being like,
well,
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I bashed the shit out of Star Wars, so this is a Star Wars type thing where like the Hunter Seeker has to see you, and this is my chief complaint with all droids in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Why the fuck do they have eyes? Why do they talk to each other?
Yeah.
Roger just makes me lose my bananas. Like,
yeah,
my kids will not watch Star Wars stuff with me anymore because the minute I hear Roger, I just start going off. And the kids are like, Dad, could you just relax? And I'm like, no, I can't. Or like they're fucking sneaking around to avoid the droid seeing or hearing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the best. I mean, I think what you're doing is critiquing the idea that they put essentially the limitations of human sensory perception.
Anthropomorphized robots,
which is a very limited thing to do with your technology. That is not, it's not really what you would, you wouldn't go to all the trouble of creating a droid to then just have it be sort of a shitty human that doesn't need as many resources to run. It's a little bit.
I just want you to imagine I'm the scientist who's invented the new amazing robot with human capabilities. And I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the Dum Dum 3000. He's modeled after the stupidest person I could find. That person was also arthritic and had gout in one leg. So my robot like limps and can't pick shit up that's heavier than like, a pound. And has an IQ of 30.
So basically, it's like a Roby. It's like a Roby, right?
Yeah, they're like, but if we mass produce these things, we'll rule the world. And you're like, okay, yeah. Anyway,
so Paul catches the Hunter Seeker.
Sure does.
We come to find out that's because of his Bene Gesserit training. We'll get into that in a minute. Catches it right as the door was opening, and there she is. It's Shadout Mapes, the Shadout
Mapes, the Shadout. Yep.
And he's got this thing in his hand. He slams the needle part of it or the pointy part into the door or in the wall so that it, obviously crushes it, it blunts it, it cracks it in half, and then it can't actually do anything harmful from there. And she's standing there and she's like, whoa, you just saved my life, didn't you?
God dang it, I owe you my water now.
Yeah. And he's like, well, I think I saved both of our lives. And she's like, she's pretty adept. She's like, I think you probably could have let me just get killed and you could have made an escape.
That's what a Harkonnen would have done.
Right. And so I'm gonna link this, jumping a little bit forward. He uses some real good closed power delegation of responsibility and tasks her pretty much immediately after doing a little introduction, finding out that he knows her mother. They met earlier. Pretty much immediately says, go to my father's men, he said. Tell them I've caught a hunter-seeker in the house and they are to spread out and find the operator. Tell them to seal off the house and its grounds immediately. They'll know how to go about it. The operator is sure to be a stranger among us.
What a pro leadership tip?
Yeah, but
when people are confused or frustrated or there's something bananas going on.
Yeah.
A large percentage, so people fall into roughly one or two camps. There's the camp that, like, when people feel stressed, they want to create order. They want to take actions to resolve that stress. Mm-hmm. And then there's another camp who wants order created for them. Mm-hmm. And then there's like a third way there where people, it's situationally dependent. But in times of chaos, giving people clear direction in that closed power, this is when closed power is the most effective it can be.
Yeah.
Do X, get the fire extinguisher, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to say a couple things about this. So I think we've seen his quick kind of transformation over the past few chapters.
Yeah.
He is he is acting like, we made this comment back in chapter 3 or whatever, is sort of the Robb Stark thing. Ned Stark leaves. Robb is like only 15 or 16 and suddenly he's a general and then he's a king and he's commanding armies of like 20,000 troops with men twice his age as sort of the people directly underneath him, and his mother, because he doesn't have his own point of view chapter. So his mother is watching him and being like, who is this man suddenly in front of me? My boy was a boy a year ago. Now it's like he's a man and he's a king and he's telling me to go away and there's no room for mom in here. We're seeing, I read this and was like, wow, this is someone who's been prepared to take command when the time comes. And, he doesn't freak out. He tells them very clear, he knows that he shouldn't go and do it. He knows that other people should be. So he knows that someone else should be the messenger and he knows someone should do the nuts and bolts labor of searching the house. So there are people whose dedicated job is to do that instead of him just going and, we got to look for it or whatever. Also, I just can't help but think, and this is it's an open question I'm going to ask you. Earlier, he refers to her as a creature. Do you, she's a Fremen. She's got the blue and blue eyes. She looks aesthetically different than him. Do you think some of his comfort in commanding could be that he views himself as obviously higher on the totem pole in virtually every way possible?
Oh, that's got to be a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's like in a dick way.
Yeah.
But I think part of this just comes, so, we talk about structure and the impact that it has on behavior quite a bit in our coaching context. And so this is an example where the system that he's in is one in which people respond to the structure. The structure is the sort of hierarchy. And so he probably carries himself that way naturally as a result of the environment he's in. He's probably never known a moment where people weren't deferential to his wishes, except in the small circles.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He probably can't boss Thufir around because Thufir would say.
Thufir would whip him with his eyebrows.
Right. So she revealed before he delegates her responsibility. She says, "Oh, I met your mother. I met her, on the stairs to the weirding room." We're going to talk about that in a minute. But she says, "Yeah, before I do your bidding, I must cleanse the way between us. You've put a water burden on me that I'm not sure I care to support.
Yeah.
We Fremen pay our debts, be they black debts or white debts. And it's known to us that you've a traitor in your midst. Who it is, we cannot say, but we're sure of it. Mayhap there's the hand guided that flesh cutter." Paul absorbed this in silence. A traitor. Before he could speak, the odd woman whirled away and ran back before the entry. So Paul's tempted to call her back and then realizes she'll probably be resented. She's going to do his bidding and he should, that's sufficient.
Yeah, should let her do her jam. Yep.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about this is it took me, 20 seconds to be like, this is just obviously, I guess you'd call it a red herring. Mm-hmm. So the traitor is definitely not the person running the hunter seeker. We find out in a future chapter.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very minor point in the future chapter. Sorry that I'm spoiling it right now, but it's a Harkonnen agent, definitely not a traitor. But also, yes, there is a traitor. Do they know about Yui? Yui? Do they know it's him? How do they know about him? How did they get that information? Or, when I say red herring, I'm looking at two paths. There is a traitor, but there's also not related to this event whatsoever. In fact,
it's a great question, right? What's the source of that information?
Uh-huh.
So it could be because because Mapes and others were serving in the Harkonnen household, and they're like good arch villains. Mm-hmm. They like to sit around and describe their grand plans and the intricate details. So it's possible that they overheard some or part of it. Mm-hmm. So they may not know who the traitor is, but knowing that one is there, that's a piece of information that could easily have fallen from a sloppy Harkonnen. And there's lots of reason to think that that's the case, right? Because of the way that the way that in particular Vladimir Harkonnen deals with people, mm-hmm. right? He feeds them whatever their sort of thing is, whatever their addiction or whatever their sort of dark habit is, he feeds that mm-hmm. in exchange for them doing his bidding. So mm-hmm. this strategy is effective in terms of creating minions, but it doesn't make your minions especially effective.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's got to kill them a lot.
Right. So she's off to do his bidding. He's taking in this conversation. He's like, okay, well, that's it. I've seen a Fremen. Water-starved, prune-wrinkled, obviously tan-skinned, darkly browned, the blue and blue eyes without any white in them. And he attached the label, the Shadout Mapes, and he found himself going, she'd said his mother was someplace down here, stairs, a weirding room. Which in the moment, we're in on this book, 88, page 88, it has that, it's just out of nowhere.
Zero fucking context.
Yeah. And it'll come up later. So we're going to dive into the Bene Gesserit training, Prana-Bindu training, in the weirding way. So there's no context for the weirding room later, and it's revealed later on in the book that the weirding way is the term that, I'm going to say it's the Fremen term for it. To my knowledge, not officially used by Jessica or anyone else associated with the Bene Gesserit in any way. But it's the weirding way is, again, I'll say it again, my belief is that it's the Fremen name for the very interesting or sort of almost magical looking martial arts that the Bene Gesserit are able to perform and Jessica in the future will do. So it is, again, it's the martial arts of the Bene Gesserit, but that kind of brings us back to what exactly, the Bene Gesserit training, what exactly is it? What is it all about? We have the trusty Dune encyclopedia. Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I was going to say, so what we have here from our trusty Dune encyclopedia is basically the idea that there's a couple ways of articulating it, but I'm going to say it, I'm going to do it this way. The training of the Bene Gesserit is labeled Prana-Bindu training. Mm-hmm. And in the Dune encyclopedia, it is prana is nerve and mm-hmm. Bindu is muscle. And it is basically the way of training the body and the mind to, you could say, slow down time or completely control your body such that your perception is as remarkably clear as possible. All of this is in service to the more kind of overarching goal or the way of the Bene Gesserit, which was called...
So we should define prana really quickly.
I was definitely going to go back to that.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Then go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. So the way that is sort of the objective of the Bene Gesserit training is rooted in a ancient Terran religion, which the path to the truth was called Sabda. Terran, in this case, is actually from Earth. So basically it's a religion from, when mankind was still on Earth. So Sabda, if you look that up in our world, sure looks a lot like Shabda. And Shabda is Sanskrit, the word for speech sound. And the term refers to an utterance in the sense of linguistic performance. In classical Indian philosophy of language, basically, Shabda is the idea that there is a unlimited amount of data and truths out there in the world, but the only way for one human in their limited capacity, lifespan, bandwidth, etc., to get to the truth is to hear it from trusted sources, or to hear it. And so trusted sources can become friends, family, learned people in the community, etc. So it's kind of a society building. And in a way, Jeff, it really reminds me of the comments you made an episode or two ago about Norse mythology singing the universe or the world into existence. Obviously, then Norse mythology in this case will track to the Silmarillion, or any of your Tolkien heads out there. The idea of Aule, the Ayulindale singing the world into existence. But it's kind of back to the idea of information needs to be communicated in spoken language, spoken or written. It's the power of the universe is unlocked through the transmission of information in written or verbal text in a way that the human mind can obviously comprehend it. So what do you do with Sabda? Sabda is the ability to be able to have a crystal clear ability to hear and see what is really happening around you, right? Mm-hmm. So that this is how Bene Gesserit can, make snap decisions with a full 360 awareness of what's happening around them, read the character of the people they're dealing with, know what frequency they should use the voice, all that kind of stuff we've talked about before. Mm-hmm. So now this is where we'll talk about what Prana and Bindu actually is. So Prana, as I mentioned in the encyclopedia, is called nerve training. Bindu is muscle training, but they have real world applications. So Prana in the Hindu philosophy including yoga, Indian medicine, and the Indian martial arts. Prana is the word for breath or life force or the vital principle, and it permeates reality on all levels, including inanimate objects. In Hindu literature, prana is sometimes described as originating from the sun and connecting the elements. So when I think of the fact that it refers to, in the Dune Encyclopedia, prana is referred to as nerve, I believe the relationship to, so we have to create a scenario where everything that is in the modern Dune universe, as it says here, is rooted in an ancient religion of our Earth and called Sabda in the Dune universe, obviously. So words morph over time, pronunciations change. So it's referring to probably Shabda from Hinduism. And then prana in Hinduism is, as I mentioned before, it's kind of the word for sort of the life force or the vital principle. I believe that when we say it in permeates reality on all levels, when we look at it from the idea that it isn't visibly physical, it isn't tangible in any specific way. I think that's why it's attributed to the nerve. I'm doing air quotes here with my fingers here on the recording. That's why it's referred to as nerve training. So I think it is the aspects of the Bene Gesserit training of the mind. And then Bindu refers to muscle in this particular case. So there's a lot of terms for Bindu out there. It is in Sikhism, Hinduism, Buddhism. I think I already said Hinduism, but there's a lot of different definitions and it's used in a lot of contexts. I think it would make sense to go with Bindu translates to midpoint. It refers to the midpoint between the eyebrows and is one of the most important concentration points in yoga. So while it is, in between the eyebrows, which implies kind of right here in your forehead near the pineal gland, I believe that in the sense that yoga is also an aspect of being able to control your body, I think this is where the term Bindu in terms of the muscle aspect of the Prana-Bindu training comes in. And so consequently, the full Prana-Bindu program is basically the ability to fully control both your mind and your body is ultimately, that's kind of the long story short of what the Prana-Bindu training ultimately delivers. Now, some of the specific attributes of Prana-Bindu training include things like being able to control your metabolism, being able to control literally one muscle at a time, which if you know, in a further book, someone is tasked with just trying to literally move only their one pinky toe. If you've ever, you know, if you can imagine what it would take to be able to control only literally one muscle in your body, I mean, it takes people, yogis or things like that, 30 years to you know, to be able to do that sort of thing. So being able to control your oxygen supply. So these are all the aspects of the mind and body control that years and years of Prana-Bindu training to the Bene Gesserit initiative will ultimately be able to do for them, to be able to do, you know, some of the things I just mentioned, like slow your breathing down, control your metabolism, detect and metabolize poisons in your body such that you are not, you know, you're not susceptible to being poisoned. There are some other aspects of like being able to go into a deep trance where you regenerate your cells. So these are all the things. And then ultimately, when we talk about the weirding way is, as I mentioned before, is the martial art form of the Bene Gesserit, and it is the weirding way specifically, according to like Dune fandom or the wiki, is sort of the ability to move at, you know, the equivalent of lightning speed at the exact right time by virtue of the fact that you have such specific muscular control, you know, the melding of mental and muscular control, that instead of wasting time or energy taking a big swing at someone when they're approaching you, you wait till the last possible second and you do a lightning fast kick, which Jessica, you know, demonstrates later in the book. So you lower your energy output and you strike at the exact right moment and for maximum effectiveness on your opponent. Obviously, it's dazzling to the eye. To anyone who's watching it, it looks like magic. It looks like something out of the Matrix. Or, you know, when Conor McGregor, if you're a UFC fan, I can't imagine anyone who's listening to this doesn't at least know Conor McGregor's highlights. You know, if you look at that, you know, record-setting KO of Jose Aldo back in 2015 or 2016 or whatever it was, yeah. The fact that he called it ahead of time and said, you know, Jose is going to rush in. I think he called it ahead of time. He at least predicted exactly kind of the knockout or whatever. But Jose rushed in, and with the exact perfectly timed punch, he caught him right in the temple, and Aldo was knocked out. 1-punch knockout, 3-second fight. That would be sort of a application of what someone in Dune, a Fremen, would be like, whoa, he just did the weirding way. I'll say one more thing, and then I'll let Jeff jump in, which was, and I'm losing my train of thought. What the fuck was I going to say? Because we're on the Joe Rogan coaching tree. I'm going to keep using that term, the coaching tree. There's actually someone who in the Joe Rogan kind of universe became pretty popular for, effectively speaking, Prana-Bindu training. And it's, I have a Reddit post here, and I'll include, by the way, I'm going to include all of the articles that I've looked at here about this as I've rambled about this stuff. I'm going to include that in the show notes, so check those out. There's a Reddit post. Wim Hof, the kind of creator of the Wim Hof method, the guy, you know, the Iceman, the guy who sits in an ice bath or climbed Mount Everest in shorts and a t-shirt while everyone was bundled up and all that kind of stuff. That is kind of a real world application of sort of doing the end effect of Prana-Bindu training is what Wim Hof has been able to do. So if you heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast or got into all that, I know that a couple people in our 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, John Jacques Machado world got pretty into that. I'm thinking Eric Haas, who was a brown belt last I heard from him. Maybe he's a black belt now, John Jacques Machado, black belt. He got certified in the Wim Hof method and was running what would you call them, like seminars about it, and people were doing the ice bath and doing the deep training where you suck your belly, like the Kron Gracie, like your belly's all the way like touching your spine, that kind of thing. So shout out to Joey House. Haven't talked to you in a while. Really solid jiu-jitsu guy, really cool guy all around. But anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, that was a lot. It's interesting.
So Shadout Mapes. Shadout Mapes ran into Jessica as she was effectively speaking, going into the training room, and that's kind of where all this came from.
That's right. That's right.
Shadout Mapes called it the weirding room, and Paul was like, "What the hell is the weirding room?"
So just to recap, why Prana-Bindu? It's interesting to me that they've chosen this particular direction to go. but maybe not super controversial, because Hinduism, of course, is the precursor to Buddhism, just like Judaism is the sort of the precursor or the base from which we get Christianity. Yeah. So trying to tie these things together seems interesting. So Bindu, the word literally means dot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I love the Conor McGregor metaphor, but it also makes me think. It also makes me think a little bit about. There's a bunch of things.
As in Connor got it right on the button.
He did, yeah, right on the button.
He hit the dot. He hit the button, and boom, yeah.
Yeah, and so weirding is a Fremen word. Typically, what they're talking about, it depends on how you approach this, but we end up focusing. I think because of the movie, we end up focusing on these voice techniques, but that's actually not the bulk of the Prana-Bindu training.
No, right.
The bulk of that training is physical control and mental control. And I'll tell you, this idea that your perception can alter outcomes in combat is very real. And I'll give you I hope a very clear example. So, I think it's no secret now, we grapple quite a bit. A thing that I have been taught, this comes from internal martial arts. So the Tai Chi family tree here, but this idea of where your intent or focus is really central to how you engage with an opponent. And the best example I can give you is when you're grappling, especially just take like a Russian Thai over under, like any sort of like clenchy wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of things you have to do in order to throw somebody on the ground, which is ideally what we want to do, right? We want to take the fight to the ground, and then we want to break their shit. It's pretty basic, right? The jiu-jitsu strategy, very straightforward. What I notice a lot with, especially standing, I would say, is maybe controversial, but I would say probably 98.7% of jiu-jitsu players have no standing grappling skills worth a shit, which is why people sit down. It's why they butt scoot. It's why they do a bunch of things in sport. But I think anyway, I won't go off on a huge rant, but I think this does us a disservice. But anyway, back to the point of like perception and how it affects outcome. When you tie up with somebody, there are times when you want to be pressing the action. There are times when you need to maybe be moving away from your opponent. So there's two approaches to this. One, my intent is tied to the direction of my movement.
Mm-hmm.
So if I tie up with you, Mike, and I'm like, oh shit, this guy's pretty strong or whatever, or you start like picking at my legs, or you're doing something like maybe you're trying to get under me or get over me, and I start to back up. If my intent is tied to the direction of my motion, then not only is my body moving backward, but my intent is retreat. Mm-hmm. That's usually where people get taken down. I especially love watching the old Gracie challenge videos, mm-hmm. because these guys come in all full of swagger, and then they have this moment where they're both standing, and almost always it's when the karate man or the kung fu man or whoever, when they start to back up, that's when the Gracie guys just they do that blast double, mm-hmm. or whatever. They get under them and get them to the ground. And then usually that's how the fight ends. And this is what you see this pretty commonly. Mm-hmm. So this is intent matching motion. Retreating is never a good option. Mm-hmm. So if you want to use perception to change the outcome, no matter where your hips or feet are going, your intent has to remain forward. And when that is the case, you have a strong frame, you're still strongly connected even as you're moving back. And so to catch like an Uchimata or some of the bigger throws, you have to move your hips back. But if you retreat, there's no opportunity to get the throw. You have to connect with your opponent, you have to join centers, mm-hmm. and then you have to rotate them around that axis. Those are the three things needed to throw somebody on the ground. Mm-hmm. You cannot do it if your intent and your physical motion is retreat.
Right.
Your intent has to be forward. If you watch sumos, right, their intent is never backward, even if they're moving backward.
Mm-hmm.
They're constantly pressing forward, even if their hips or feet are moving back. So that you see their torso extended, chest up so they can stay balanced, right? And this is, I think, a really good example of what's being discussed here. Here we're talking, like in Dune, we're talking about this fine-grained control, but I think the internal guys really got this right. The Chinese internal martial artists, they understood that if you want to push somebody, you want to throw somebody, your mind cannot be connected to the direction of your motion. Your mind, your perspective has to be on the outcome that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why these throws sometimes, it literally feels like it's come out of nowhere.
Is that why also, in judo parlance, people talk about like using people's weight against them and sort of or just the idea that there's something of like a trickery sometimes in takedowns? Like
absolutely,
a lot of times at the higher level, the strategy just becomes who can out sneak the other one, right? It's not so straightforward. If that makes sense.
except it's not, when they say sneak or whatever, it's not actually like mental. It's not that you're being devious. It's not that you have laid a trap or a surprise, although that is, when it happens and it's correct and you think about what you did to set it up, that's a reasonable way to talk about it, but it's actually not that accurate.
What I guess more what I meant is the idea of you can be briefly moving backwards in the idea of making someone kind of occupy a space that you want them to as part of your strategy to in fact then take them to the next. Like it's moving backwards is just one step of like three, and it's like baiting, if you want to call it that, or whatever you want to say. It's just getting them to do what you want them to do because it's part of your plan. I think what you're talking about is the attribution of effort, or sorry.
No, here's what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, sure, those things too. But what I'm saying is that when I tie up, I'll just talk about myself for a minute. I'm not the best at this. There are many great examples through history, many of them living and fighting today. So go look at those if you want examples. Look at Wagner Hoxha. Actually, the best example is Craig Jones when he pulls off those big Harai Gauche throws. His hips are moving backward to create space to come back in, but his upper body and head and his whole intent is driving forward into his opponent. So you see the clench, you see their heads connected. There's forward pressure, even as he sinks into his own hips, moves his hips back. The feet might even walk back. But if you're the person who is engaged with, say, Craig Jones in this state, you do not feel that person running away.
Right.
You feel that person as a clear impediment to your forward progress.
Right.
And then what Craig Jones is really good at is like winding up his opponent. And then when he switches his hips, the thing that feels sneaky, when he switches his hips or he bars the hip with his leg, all that energy that he's borrowing from his opponent, that opponent either pressing in or trying to turn away from him, Craig Jones borrows all that force. And then when that force is released, you see that Harai Gauche is a big throw. A lot of energy is released when the guy falls. So they're usually like watching Craig Jones do, it's beautiful. Because they're twisting themselves together into a knot. And then the minute that Craig Jones throws that leg out, it gives all the energy a direction to go. And sure enough, it's like a piñata exploding or whatever. Right. They fly through the air. So it's real in that sense. Like, of course, in the Dune universe, it's like at the molecular level, I can control my pituitary gland or whatever. I'm not saying that's real. And it may be important to mention, many people who tried to do the Wim Hof thing using Wim Hof's methods have died. So I don't know, right? But I do know this idea of you should lead with your intent. Everything that my internal martial arts teacher has ever said to me is all on that basis. And it plays out mainly in standing grappling. It also plays out on the ground. But standing grappling is unique in the sense that there are far more variables at work. Right? When I'm on my back, it's the world is, or when I'm on top of somebody, the world has effectively been reduced by half, right?
Right.
But when we're standing, there's a whole world of opportunity. And so the main art that I've studied with my teacher is Bagua. Bagua is a combative at its heart. It's not the kind of Tai Chi that you see in the park. It's wrestling with this kind of mental focus. And the whole goal is to get behind your opponent. So often when I use these techniques, and when they're used against me, the experience is that all of a sudden, so they describe the weirding way as like a kind of teleportation.
Right.
And if somebody ever gets behind you, when you have a hold of their limbs, you've got like a good outside grip or whatever, and then suddenly that person does a good duck under, or they go for a crossbody clench, and suddenly they're behind you. You know exactly what the weirding way is, because it feels like teleportation.
Right.
I was holding this thing. I was framing against this thing, and then suddenly it disappears, and oops, I'm getting choked, or oops, I'm on my back, or worse, I'm flying through the air.
Right. And obviously, I would assume they call it the weirding way in the sense that they had never seen anything like that.
It's a Fremen word. I actually don't know. They use it in a lot of different ways. So they call Jessica the weirding woman. They call it, for them, weirding really refers to Bene Gesserit. And I don't know.
Yeah, I wondered if it just means off, someone from off planet, if it means someone kind of strange foreign ways, exotic. That's my, in the sense that it's obviously the word weird is in there. To me, it just is, in the sense that you got people from like your rural Ohio who are going to view, city slickers from New York as being, fast and, what have you. To me, that's just the Fremen are observing, because they've been on Arrakis for like 3,000 years, right?
Yeah.
My view is, and again, this is where I kind of poke fun at Frank Herbert a little bit, is like, yeah, he's saying that they're weird. Like he's saying that it is, they're sort of abnormal. They're abnormally fast. It's exotic. It's what have you. Simplistic read, but I think it obviously has some merit to it.
Yeah, I think so. Weird is a sense of disbelief or alienation in someone, right? So to that extent, I think that's got to be what is really being discussed.
Plus, you think of the Missionaria Protectiva that laid the tracks for this already. That this person's going to come with their strange powers and abilities. They're going to move at lightning speed in combat. All right.
There we go.
I don't have anything more to say. Do you?
So this is the end of the chapter, right?
Yeah. We said we were going to do one chapter today, and I think that's perfect because I will. What?
Oh, I was just going to recap. Paul saves Mapes. We now know that the Fremen know there's a traitor. Paul now knows there's a traitor. Also, they must know that there's an operator, so they sent her out to find the operator, right?
He sent her to gather his father's men to do. Yeah. To raise the alarm and do the clean sweep. So yeah.
Well, this feels like a good place to stop. So what did we cover? Yeah. We covered. Oh, I actually wanted to talk about one more thing in relation to the weirding way, and then we can. I know we're way over.
No, I'm fine. In fact, this is a good note to the audience. We started an hour earlier. I kind of like the way it matches my life.
Yeah, it also reminds me of like Death Touch, the Dim Mak stuff. So there's some aspect of that. Like there are references to like that disemboweling kick. Right? Or like kicking someone's head off their shoulders. This is like in martial arts, there's the fabled, like you touch a person in a particular way, and the 5-point exploding heart palm technique.
Right.
Part of it lives in that family too. So I just want to be clear. When I talk about intent and grappling and whatever, I'm talking about perspective matching action. I am not talking about throwing chi energy at your opponents or like hitting spleen pressure point number 72. Like that is not what I'm talking about.
I think probably if we want to, there's probably some element here where, because this was written in 1965, that maybe Frank Herbert kind of was.
Easily. Yeah, easily.
Maybe your, boots on the ground, realistic kind of analysis of Craig Jones using Prana-Bindu is like the real thing, but what actually Frank probably meant was more the what have you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Look, maybe the best examples of Prana-Bindu today are just people taking steroids and beating smaller people up.
Yeah,
that's maybe in however many years, and maybe another 10 or 20,000 years, this will evolve into something different. But but for today, little testosterone. You too.
Yeah,
can use the wording way in combat.
Yeah. So yeah, Jet put together some nice outro for us. So here's what we covered in this episode: a hunter-seeker deep dive. Jeff goes on kilos versus pounds, old math versus new math. I said old man.
Math, yeah.
You call yourself old man a lot, so that's and
Fair
the concept
enough.
Common Core Standards Initiative. Mike interprets the parallels between the Bene Gesserit way, Prana-Bindu, and the Dune Universe with IRL, Prana and Bindu in real life. Jeff continues this deep dive with mind versus body and martial arts, Bagua fighting style, parallels weirding way fighting.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That's our episode today. Go listen to Ricky Martin's Livin' La Vida Loca if you haven't in a while. It's a song that stands the test of time. It's been 21 years since it was released. I think you're gonna love it.
I can't wait.
Okay.
When our autonomous collective is formed, that should be our national. That should be our collective theme song.
Okay, cool.
All right, I'll see you guys later.
All
Thank you so much.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Like and subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. And to hear more readings, become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/decodepodcast.